I read 100 of the greatest relationship books on the planet, and here are 10 gold nuggets of advice from these books that can absolutely help you to transform your relationship or your marriage right now. Number one, communication is key. Communication is absolutely essential in order for a relationship to flourish. And in John Gottman's book, The 7 Principles to Make Marriages Work, he talks about how to communicate and making sure that you express your thoughts and your feelings without blame and anger towards each other. And especially using I statements to prevent defensiveness from occurring whenever you communicate. He uses the example of saying, I feel lonely and overwhelmed when I'm at home with the kids and you're at work late. Rather than saying, it's so selfish when you work late and expect me to manage everything and so on. I found this in my own practice. Whenever you say things like, honey, this is the way I'm feeling at the moment. I'm not saying that you're the one that's actually contributing to this, but I'm just expressing to you how I feel when these circumstances arise. I'd really want to talk about it and be able to just work through it together with you. Saying something like that is so much more powerful than going at your partner and being attacking in your communication. Secondly, prioritizing quality time. Quality time is more than just being in the same room together and sitting on the couch and just watching a movie. It's about sharing meaningful activities with each other. And what I see a lot in relationships is so many couples just coexist, but they're not actually doing things in a meaningful way with each other. They're not sharing experiences together. And in the book, Hold Me Tight by Dr. Sue Johnson, she talks about how emotional connections are strengthened through shared experiences and intentional conversations. Scheduling date nights where you're completely eradicating the use of phones and other bits of technology, where you're actually present with each other, where you're talking with each other, talking about meaningful things, goals, dreams, desires, difficult experiences, and so on, are extremely powerful ways to be able to develop a really strong bond. And I've always said that when you do that, when you talk about things that only the two of you really know about, you create a bond that can really stand the test of time. So really make an effort to schedule in that quality time and make sure that you're actually doing something at a deep level and not just surface level behaviors like just hanging out and watching a movie together. A lot of the times that might seem like quality time, but it's actually not developing that real in-depth bond, and that's what we want to really do. Thirdly, conflict resolution. Any relationship is going to have conflict. That is just inevitable, and it's an important part of it. And what's really key to understand is when you have conflict, that's actually an opportunity. That's an opportunity to work through some difficult times together, come out the other end, and actually build something even better than what it was. Now, in the book Crucial Conversations, the authors actually provide a series of tools and strategies to work through some of this conflict resolution. Techniques such as staying calm, respectful language, and active listening are all strategies that they actually employ in order to help you to improve your conflict resolution skills. Now, a couple of examples around that is firstly to keep the environment safe. When you have a safe environment emotionally, it allows both parties to actually express themselves and share what's actually going on. If you share something and you immediately get defensive and you challenge him immediately and so on, or vice versa, then that's creating an unsafe emotional environment to feel comfortable and open to be able to express how you feel. So create that safe environment and listen. Be patient, and actually, if you're not sure about what he's trying to say, or if you're getting a little bit defensive internally, you might say something like, okay, hun, so thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. So if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is when I do this, this is what happens, or whatever it is, the example is. Is that correct? Is that what's going on there? And he will say, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. And then that way you can respond, say, okay, well, I really appreciate that. I'm not quite ready to respond to that at the moment. However, I really appreciate you sharing something like that. If you're not ready to talk about it, if you are, fantastic. But you're really taking that approach of understanding and being curious about the situation, not reacting in a defensive way. The other point they make is the importance of changing your story in relation to the behavior. Rather than maybe holding on to the narrative that I'm not lovable, or I'm not worthy, or I'm feeling abandoned, or whatever it may be, we can shift that and just acknowledge the behavior that has been engaged in the moment, but not actually create the narrative and what we call a global narrative in ourselves, in saying that, I am not enough, or I'm unworthy of love, or whatever it may be. allow yourself to assess that behavior and just that behavior only, rather than expanding on it too much. Because if you do that, then that's going to change the meaning in your own mind and force you to then have even more intense emotions, resulting in you reacting in negative ways that are probably not going to help you in terms of your communication. Number 4 is practicing gratitude. In the book, The Relationship Cure by John Gottman, he talks a lot about expressing gratitude, having appreciation for your partner. You know, acknowledging and appreciating each other fosters a really positive environment. And when there's a positive environment and there's lovely emotions going into the relationship, it's going to allow you guys to connect even more. So getting into a daily habit of sharing some of the things that you're grateful for each other, or just things that you admire and appreciate about each other, can really help you to get momentum in a relationship on a daily basis. And the thing with relationships, the ones that go really, really well, they always do little things behind closed doors on a regular basis. It's not these grand gestures that you often see on Facebook and so on. It's the little things that compound and compound over time. And that's what I've always seen in relationships. The ones that actually do a lot of the grand gestures, they're often having problems. But the ones that do little things over and over and over, they're the ones that eventually their relationship compounds and compounds to the point where they've got something that is absolutely rock solid, sustainable. They're able to work through conflict resolution. They have wonderful time. They spend a lot of quality time together and so on. And that's how you create something really extraordinary. Fifthly, in Marianne Williamson's amazing book, A Return to Love, she talks about how love is a conscious choice and not just a feeling that we stumble upon. She argues that true love is a conscious choice to see the best in each other, regardless of whatever circumstances that you're actually dealing with right now. She often talks a lot about forgiveness, which is what she calls selective remembering. The choice to actually focus on the good and not all the bad stuff all the time. Now that doesn't mean you just let someone get away with terrible behavior, whatever that is. Sometimes it's about actually filling ourselves up with love to remember, hey look, that kind of behavior is unacceptable and I'm not deserving of that kind of treatment anymore. And I recognize that he is wounded. I recognize he's going through some challenges, but I don't want to be around that anymore. So I'm choosing love. I'm making the choice to step into self-love, which allows you to act in the best possible way. But if it's not about actually walking away from a relationship, if you're actually in a lovely marriage or a relationship, but you're going through some tough times, she talks about making the conscious choice to choose love over fear. Fear often clouds our judgment. Fear results in all of our past experiences and so on coming to the surface and then being projected into the future and then resulting in all of these negative actions and negative behaviors and so on. That ultimately ends up resulting in self-sabotage. And I see so many times where really good relationships end up just falling apart because they self-sabotage, because they choose fear over love. And one thing she always talks about is, in any moment, am I making the choice to come from fear, or am I making the choice to come from love? And that is your choice. And it's something that absolutely can completely change the trajectory of your life depending on which path you go down. My prayer is that you choose love. Number 6, in the same book, A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson, she talks about how relationships act as incredible mirrors to our own self. You know, what I've always found in my own life is that there have been different situations in my life where I've maybe attracted a number of different types of people who are exhibiting similar qualities that I'm getting triggered by. So I remember a long time ago, there was this period where I was attracting a lot of really angry people into my life and I couldn't understand it. I always tried to come across in a really, really nice way. And there was all these people in my workplace at the time who were just really pissed off and really angry, and I couldn't understand it. And it used to affect me so much, and I wanted to file personal grievances and so on. And suddenly I started coming across this idea of relationships as mirrors. And I realized that it was actually reflecting back to me a part of myself that I needed to address, that I needed to heal. Some of that suppressed anger that I needed to actually work through and process. And as I did that, I found more peace. And incredibly, I started to see a different side to them. I didn't see things through the lens of anger. I saw it through love, and allowed me to have compassion. And funnily enough, when I started to make those shifts, they started to shift tremendously as well. And the reason I point this out is because it's not just about intimate relationships, it's about relationships full stop. It could be with your spouse, it could be with your friends, it could be with an absolute stranger, it doesn't matter. Relationships act as mirrors, and we want to look at what the behaviors are that we're getting triggered by that person and understand, what is it about me that I need to address? Is there something that that person is reflecting back to me that I need to look at? It is a slightly deeper concept, but it is important that as you evolve on your journey and you're working through these challenges, this can really help you to take a level of responsibility in the relationship and then have a more curious and more loving approach to your spouse. And when you do that, once again, it's going to help you to have an incredible level of communication with each other, take a really curious approach, and just really build up that love in ways that you truly have always wanted. Number 7, embracing vulnerability. You know, vulnerability is often perceived as a weakness, but in Brené Brown's book, Daring Greatly, she talks about how vulnerability is such a strength. Being open about our fears and our insecurities and all of these deeper wounds that we have helps to build trust and helps to really build a greater sense of connection with your spouse. It allows you to create that safe space between the two of you, and as you continue to have more of these conversations in a safe environment, it builds that trust and allows you to develop a bond that is unbreakable over a long period of time. Number 8, keeping the passion alive. You know, in Esther Perel's book, Mating in Captivity, she talks about how when we have structure and when we're really creating certainty all the time in our relationships, where everything's predictable, is going to completely ruin your passion. You know, passion exists in the realms of uncertainty. You know, she talks about how couples are encouraged to create excitement, spontaneity, things that you just wouldn't even think about. You know, start doing some wild things and some fun things and some spontaneous things in your life. And when you do more of that, of course, coupled in with, you know, the day-to-day aspects of your life in terms of work and so on, you've got to obviously take care of those things, but you have to set aside time to doing some really crazy things, or not even set aside time for it. Just go out there and be spontaneous with some of the things that you want to do. You know, do some crazy things in terms of places to engage in intimacy or whatever it is. Be spontaneous. Don't always do the same things and go to the same restaurants and watch the same movies. You're going to ruin the passion. There's not going to be any excitement to any of that. You want to start creating that spark. And always remember, passion always exists in the realms of uncertainty. And when you hold on to that idea and you stick with it, you'll be able to find a really lovely balance where there's going to be moments where, once again, you're going to need some structure and you're going to need some certainty, but balance it out with that wild streak. And all human beings have that side of them, but they often suppress it. Let it come to the surface, bring out that spontaneity, and watch the passion in your relationship completely skyrocket. Number 9, supporting each other's growth. It's so important to help each other grow, to become the best versions of yourselves. And if either of you are engaging in business activities or whatever it is, talk to each other and actually support each other, lift each other up. In The New Rules of Marriage by Terence Real, he talks about the importance of constantly sharing goals, sharing dreams, sharing aspirations, and even some of the greater details within those goals. You know, I often think about, with me and my wife, we often talk about these things in our dreams and desires and our fears and our insecurities and so on. And what it does is it really helps us to get a really accurate picture about what's actually going on in each other's mind with respect to our businesses or other areas of our lives. And once again, it helps us to build a deeper bond. I always say, when you can do that, no one else can compete. You know, sometimes people worry about their partners going and engaging in infidelity, but you know, if you have something where you're talking about your dreams and your fears and you're meeting each other's needs on, you know, levels of 9, 10 out of 10 all the time, regularly, what's going to happen? They're going to want to stick with you. They're going to be a pest because they love being around you so much. It's a wonderful thing. Rather than, you know, when it becomes mundane and boring and people aren't really interested in any of it, then what's going to happen? Well, they're going to start, you know, looking elsewhere or doing things that breach their own values. And that always hurts me so much when I see couples go down that path. You know, really include your partner in your dreams and your desires and so on, and play an active role in his. And that can really help to strengthen things even more. And finally, understanding the 5 love languages. Gary Chapman talks about in the 5 love languages how all of us as human beings typically are driven by one or more of these 5 love languages. Now, these 5 love languages are physical touch, quality time, acts of service, gifts, and words of affirmation, not in that order. But each of us prioritize different love languages. For some people, they value quality time so much that you can go off and buy a special gift for them and they'll be like, oh wow, thanks, that was really lovely. But it doesn't hit them at their core. But if you spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes of just dedicated focus time with them, it lights them up like a Christmas tree. Another person might get words of affirmation and it makes them feel really nice. But when you put your arm around them and make them feel special like that, that once again lights them up. So everyone has a different love language and a driver. And it's important to understand what your partner's love languages are and what yours are. And that way you can communicate those things. And when you actually understand each other and each other's love languages, you can start to meet those on a regular basis. If you don't understand them, what I see all the time is where couples think, okay, well, I actually want to go and buy him a really, really special gift, something really amazing. And they give it to him. And yeah, he likes it, but it doesn't blow him away. But if they made the effort to actually engage in some acts of service, that might be something that is really important to them, that just makes him feel so loved and so special. And equally for the female partner, she has her love languages, but he goes off and wants to create some grand gesture in terms of, gifts or whatever it may be. And it doesn't really do anything because she wants quality time. So really make a conscious effort to understand your partner's love language, really go through the depths of that. And when you start to understand that, you have the greater conversation and utilize some of the principles that I've talked about so far, it can really help you to create a relationship that's going to stand the test of time. So I hope this all makes sense and you've really found value in these points. If you've liked this video, make sure you hit that like button below. If you want to get more videos like this, hit that subscribe button. And do let me know if you've got any comments or questions regarding any of these books and so on. I always love responding to them. So make sure you write them below and I'll respond to every single one of you. And what I recommend you do now is if you want to work on really trying to take your relationship to the next step, you want to learn more about your husband, understand the secrets to make him tick, click this video below. Thank you so much. God bless, and I'll talk to you in the next video.